Okay. Interestingly, what kinds of objections do you hear from businesses when you talk about AI and automation?
So there's one example that I think about more than anything. So it was a very large network of car dealerships, of branded car dealership that we all have heard of. And there was the service department. Now, I'd been told by the chief exec that he thought that the service department had possibly the most opportunity to change, because it was so many manual processes. It was crazy. And when he explained it to me, I agreed. And the funniest thing was, is we go into the meeting with the board, and the service director sits there. The whole meeting, he's got his arms crossed like this. And then it comes around to his turn to kind of what he thinks about AI and automation. He goes, no, he says, I've thought about this, and there's absolutely nothing that could be changed in my department because it's just impossible. So that's, I guess, a slightly extreme example, but a very real example. Um, so you get things like that. You get things, my department's fine. Honestly, it's okay. We don't need to change anything. We did some work recently with quite a number of large further education colleges, so public sector, and they were quite interesting because they were particularly interesting because they all agreed there was lots of stuff to do and potential, but then all agreed that they probably shouldn't do it anyway because that was just the way that they were. So that's a good one. A big one and an important one, and one that needs to be recognised, is you get questions like, or you'll get feedback, things like, well, the software we use. So let's use, I don't know, Salesforce as an example. The
Mhm.
software that we use, or the ERP system that we use, I think they're going to be doing a lot of this stuff in the future. So we're going to hold off until that happens. Now, that is a very valid point. A lot of these providers are building AI and automation into their businesses. However, I would point out that I'm yet to go into a business that has one piece of software that doesn't interact with anyone or anything else elsewhere. So you still will find that they will do these updates, but you'll still have people copying stuff into a spreadsheet, copying it into a different system, or doing those manual processes. So I don't always think that's a necessary. It's a valid kind of feedback, but I think there's more around that. And then the last one, which is slightly tongue in cheek, but it kind of reminds me of the bad old days of web design, which is, some people say to me, well, yeah, you know what, my nephew's studying computers at college, so I think we might just get him to come in and have a look at this. He likes AI. So that's sometimes a feedback as well.
Why do some teams see this as a low priority, and what's the risk of this mindset?
Hmm. The obvious one is that people are threatened. They're threatened about their jobs. They're threatened by, it ultimately comes down to job, but it also comes down to put a slightly psychological spin on it. But it also comes down to how people define themselves. You've got people in businesses who've been working there for maybe a number of years, maybe lots of years, and they define themselves on the work that they do. It could be that they are, we see this a lot in the finance department, they this is what they've always done. They've always done it this way and it works. So why break it? And when someone, some upstart like me comes along and says, well, actually, maybe we need to look at this in a different way, and maybe see if there's a more efficient way of doing it. It really pushes on something which feels quite threatening. So I think people, leaders, need to be very mindful of that, because people are worried about what's going on when it comes to automation, when it comes to AI and robots as well. It's a whole nother area. So that tends to be a pushback. And so what happens is people will, whether consciously or unconsciously, deprioritize any task that they've given that's around this. So we see this quite a lot. I always use finance as an example, but finance director comes in, he agrees it's great that we're going to automate this particular process, as invoicing again, for example, as an example. And then the people in that team just don't seem to be able to find the time to do what they need to do to help model that process. And we call them blockers. They really are putting everything in the way to block it. And what you get there is you get a situation where there's frustration from the leadership team because they want to move forward with these things, frustration from us when we're doing it because we need that information to do it, and it's difficult. So the way to resolve that with whoever you work with is to try and keep, we always do like weekly heartbeat meetings with clients, because by doing that, and you want to get everyone involved in those meetings, because by doing that, the potential blockers can see that they are being observed and they need to be moving things forward, and the leaders also know what's happening as well, because often they can give it someone else to do, and then they get frustrated because nothing's happening. But this keeps everyone on track.
Okay, so that then leads on to how can leaders get buy-in from their teams and shift from resistance to curiosity?
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen, which is really nice, is people saying to their teams, their staff, no one's losing their job. I know that can be quite categorical in terms, and maybe that's not what they want to do. But I think if they genuinely don't want that to happen, then they should tell their staff that. We've been doing this for quite a number of years. We've not had clients do this to remove staff. And I can say that with that kind of hand on heart. They are doing it to grow without having to take on more and more staff. The biggest challenge is that it's difficult to find good staff. Staff, of course, are expensive. A different generation of people are coming into the workforce now who don't necessarily want to do some of this kind of mundane, boring work. They want to be doing stuff that's interesting, and so there's that. So I think being very open with people about that is very important. I think the other thing that's important is to get the buy-in from your teams, and what I mean by that is encourage them to be curious and to experiment. When I stand in front of teams and talk to them, there'll always be a few people who are really excited by this. You know, they go home, they're using ChatGPT, they're messing around with creating images. This curious mind, this way of thinking differently and being engaged, these I think are going to be the leaders of the future, because they really get it already, and they're already a few steps ahead. And somehow you need to make the environment kind enough so that people feel that they can do that. And I think the opposite of doing that, which I don't think is a good idea, is to do a total lockdown on anything like this. So, you know, you can't use this in the workplace, you can't use this, you can't do that. I think that's going to cause big problems for businesses in the future.